Howdy y'all. I have come here this evening to bring to you a few tips, hints, and tricks for hard times. So I've made a few notes here and I'm going to do a few videos, maybe a series of videos on how to make the most of what you've got during hard times. So this time, on this video, I'm going to mostly be talking about food and how to make the food that you have right now last as long as possible. Okay, so the first point I want to talk about is eating less and eating less often. It's good to try to think about hunger in a different way than most of us probably do now. You don't have to eat every time you feel hungry. Just because you feel the sensation of hunger doesn't mean that you need to run and go get something to eat. Feeling hungry is okay. A healthy person should feel hungry several times a day. And if you have special dietary restrictions or you're not on a standard diet, if you have, if you're diabetic or if you're gluten-free or if you're low carb or high calorie or whatever your diet may be, it may not go with my tips and hints here. These are for someone who can tolerate a standard diet without any problems. Okay, so eating less and eating less often is a great way to think about it. I've heard all of my life that breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Well, that's not actually true. When you get up and you have your coffee or your tea or whatever, if you can push back breakfast or maybe skip breakfast entirely, that is a great way to save on what you've got, because if you don't eat that egg and bacon, you can use that to make cornbread and pinto beans later in the day and feed everybody in the household. So, of course, this isn't good for children or anybody that should be not reducing their calories, but if you're a healthy, active person and you don't need to worry about losing weight or whatever, reduce what you eat. Skip breakfast entirely. Try to have 2 meals a day, maybe just 1 meal a day. That'll save tremendously on your food. Don't snack. If you find yourself in the kitchen and you're looking in the pantry and you're standing in front of the fridge, what do I want to eat? Nothing. Wait until you need a meal. Put that off. Just because you feel a little bit peckish doesn't mean you need to go eat something. So wait and postpone that for about an hour. Sometimes you're not even hungry. Sometimes you're bored. Sometimes you're stressed. Sometimes you'll feel hungry and you'll think about eating like a piece of juicy fruit or some fruit salad or a popsicle or something. And really you just need to hydrate. If you were to drink some water, you probably wouldn't be hungry. So consider why you're hungry. Don't eat if you don't actually need to eat. And when you do eat, try to eat less. Okay, so the next point I've got here is about using perishables first. So if you have some stuff in your pantry and you have some stuff in your fridge, you're going to want to try and use up your perishables first. Now, of course, if they're frozen and they keep for a long time, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about things that are in the fridge that might go bad. So you want to use those things first. So right now at a premium there is meat, eggs, cheese, milk, bread, that kind of stuff. So if you don't have it, when you do get it, you may want to use it more gradually or ration out your bread or whatever. So say you have 2 loaves of bread and you want to eat one slowly. You don't want to eat it all up to make sure it doesn't go bad. So put one in the freezer. Don't smush anything up against it. Make sure it has plenty of space to freeze in its form. But after it gets frozen, it will be hard and you can just store it in your freezer up next to the broccoli or whatever. But when you go to defrost bread, I don't know if you have any experience with freezing bread. I'm talking about like bread in a loaf. So when you've frozen the loaf of bread and you're going to defrost it, if you just lay it on the counter, a lot of times moisture will build up in the bag and it will run down on the bottom of the bag. So you don't want to defrost your bread just lying on the cabinet like that. You want to hang it up by the little twist tie end vertically. And if you hang your bread up like that, when the moisture forms, it will all go down to the very bottom to that one heel. And that heel will be the moist piece, and the rest of the bread will be just fine. So if you don't want the bottom of your bread, every piece of bread to be moist, then defrost your bread, loaf of bread, hanging up vertically. Okay, extending your milk. Say you've got half a gallon of milk and you don't know when you're going to get any more. There's several ways you can extend your milk to last longer. I'm not talking about the freshness date. I'm talking about the quantity of milk. So there's a couple of products you can use. One is powdered milk and one is canned milk. So these are items that you can keep in the pantry, and when your actual whole milk is running low, say you've got a half a gallon of whole milk left and you need it to last the rest of the week, you can mix up a half a gallon of powdered milk, mix it with the whole milk, and then you've got another gallon of milk there. That'll last through the week. You can do the same thing with canned milk, sometimes called pet milk or evaporated milk. You mix it up, I think it's 1 to 1, a can of milk to a can of water, and you can put that in with your whole milk too, and that will stretch the milk and make it last longer. And it's fine for baking and cooking. You can't tell the difference. It's okay for cereal if you're wanting to give the kids cereal and there's not quite enough milk. It works for that. If the kids are going to just drink it straight or something like that, you might want to put a little Hershey syrup in it because it doesn't taste just like milk. You can imagine it's not as rich and creamy as whole milk is. But like I said, for cooking, making gravies or breads or cornbread or something, it's fine. It'll work great. Okay, eggs. So eggs also are at a premium right now, and so if you have eggs, then you want to make them last. So there are a few ways to preserve eggs so that they'll last longer. If you have small eggs or large ice cube trays, you can crack your eggs into ice cube trays and freeze them solid a day or two in the freezer. You can put plastic wrap over them so that they don't get anything in them. And freeze them solid. Then you crack them out and you put those egg blocks, those frozen egg cubes, into a gallon Ziploc freezer bag. And then when you need an egg, you just take a frozen square out and that's what you use. Now these are good for baking. You can do scrambled eggs with them. They're a little bit rubbery after they've been frozen. I wouldn't suggest using these eggs for like a fried egg. But, you know, in a pinch, they'd make a fried egg sandwich or something like that, you know. But as far as like using in baking for your breads and cookies and cakes, cornbread stuff, they're fine. You can't tell the difference. They work great. Also, if you want to preserve eggs, you can pickle some. It's real easy. You just save your favorite pickle juice after you've eaten all the pickles out of there. Keep the pickle juice. And mostly pickles come in those resealable jars, you know, the ones that have the little rubber around them and the little button on top. When you open them for the first time, they'll, you know, pop. That seal will pop. And if you look on the lid, there's a little rubber ring inside there on the lid. So you can actually reseal those jars. You save the juice and set it to the side and boil you half a dozen eggs and peel them and put them in that cleaned out jar. You know, clean that jar real good and put your boiled peeled eggs in there, and then bring that juice, the pickle juice, up to a real light simmer and then pour it over them eggs and then put the lid back on there, and then you set that in a hot water bath. It's just barely simmering, and that lid should go and pop right down there, you know, go. But if it doesn't, you can take a ladle and you can bathe that pickle jar with that boiling water. Not boiling, just simmering. And it'll go ahead and it'll seal. And then those eggs are good on the shelf until you crack that seal. After you crack the seal, you'll want to put them in the fridge. I keep them in the fridge anyway because I like them cold. But you can use those anytime you're going to use like chopped up boiled eggs and chopped up pickles, like potato salad, macaroni salad, tuna fish, that kind of stuff. They're great. If you're going to do pickles and boiled eggs, just use pickled eggs. You get the same pickly flavor and you get your eggs in there. And that's another way to store eggs for a long period of time. And they're good as deviled eggs too. Pretty good. If you like pickles. Of course, if you don't like pickles, you won't like them. Okay, start thinking like, okay, if you've got a little bit of meat in your freezer and you want it to last as long as you can, stop thinking about meat as the star of the show. Think of it as, you know, one of the bit players. It's gone from being the main thing to being an ingredient, maybe even a condiment. So we're just going to use meat to flavor other things, and that way your meat will go a lot further. Say you've got a pound of ground beef. You don't have to use that pound to make one meal. In fact, that can make several meals. So be sure and think about meat in a different way and make it go as far as possible. Like I said earlier, if you have 2 strips of bacon and 2 eggs for breakfast, that is actually enough protein to fix a large meal for like a family of 5. You could take those 2 strips of bacon and fry them up and cook a pot of beans with that. And you could take that egg and with a box of Jiffy Mix, you've got dinner. Pinto beans flavored with bacon and some cornbread. So, you know, think about meat in a different way. We don't have to have 6 or 8 ounces of meat per person per meal. It's just not necessary, especially during hard times when you're really trying to make that last. Another little tip I have is to get a savor bowl. So you get a little Rubbermaid bowl, or it can even be a little sour cream bowl or something, just a bowl with a lid that fits on there tightly, and put it in your freezer. Now every time you fixed ground beef, when you're making ground beef, whether you're going to make spaghetti or hamburger helper or tacos or whatever, before you do anything, like right after you drain it, before you do it, add your seasoning or whatever, take a spoonful or 2, a tablespoonful or 2 of the cooked ground beef and put it in your savor bowl and put that in the freezer. And every time you make something with ground beef in it, just kind of steal a couple of spoonfuls. Even if you're using a tiny bit of meat, you can spare 1 little spoonful. And always add to that little savor bowl. And if you feed it, then it will feed you. So after you've cooked all week long and you've had 3 or 4 meals made out of ground beef, your little savor bowl is ready to make a meal for you, and that is just a free meal out of nowhere. So try that. If you use ground beef a lot, try a savor bowl. It'll get you an extra meal that week. I think one more thing I'm going to do is drippings. So if you cook meat and it renders out some fat, save that fat. If you cook bacon in the morning, be sure and save that fat to cook your chicken in later that day. That way you don't have to use your vegetable oil. So save your drippings, and don't just save them, but use them promptly. It's not no good to have a big old can of mixed up old nasty grease that nobody ever wants to cook with. Save your fresh drippings off of your meat, your different rendered fats, and use them promptly in the next meal that you're going to prepare, in lieu of butter or olive oil or vegetable oil or shortening or whatever fat you're going to use to prepare it. Try to take advantage of that, and that will stretch your cooking oils even longer. So I think that's going to be it for this one, and I'll do another episode, so join me for that if you found this interesting. And also, I'd love to hear any hints, tips, or tricks that you have. So thanks for being with me, and until next time, y'all be sweet.